Hi, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar entitled Single Source of Truth in the Enterprise, Mirage or Reality. My name is Larry Pearson. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Impetus Technologies. Now I'll introduce our two speakers for today's session. Praveen Kankaria is the founder and CEO of Impetus Technologies. Impetus was founded as a U.S. corporation in 1996. We're based in the heart of Silicon Valley, and today has grown to where we are a group of companies providing solutions, services, and software platforms focused on helping large enterprises become powerfully intelligent through deep data awareness, data integration, and advanced data analytics. Much of our work recently has been around today's topics of addressing the challenges to establish a single source of truth in the enterprise. And based on that work, a major challenge is the fact that today's enterprise data warehouse landscape, which has been in place for literally some 20 years or evolving over the last 20 years, is somewhat rigidly siloed, making it very difficult to have a unified view of global operations, or what in the industry now is commonly referred to as a single source of truth. And we'll be sharing some of our experiences working with large enterprises to solve that dilemma during today's webinar. Presenting with Praveen is Ajay Anand. Ajay has been with us in one of our group companies called Kaivos Insights. Kaivos Insights is specialized on providing massively scalable BI and OLAP natively in Hadoop. Ajay comes to us with a deep association in the Hadoop and big data analytics space dating all the way back to 2007. When he was director of product management at Yahoo and led their initial Hadoop projects and releases. After that, he was also a co-founder of Datamir. Look forward to being with you today. Again, encourage you to provide your questions during the session so we can have an interesting interactive session at the back end. And right now, I'd like to turn the seminar over to Praveen Kankaria.
Thank you, Larry. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Let's examine the title of today's discussion. When I say single source of truth, what do I mean? I'm presenting my definition here. I call it a unified logical data model to consume all information across the enterprise. And I want to especially highlight the word consume here. I don't mean to, any enterprise will have so many different points for generating data or where data is entering their enterprise. But I'm going to highlight the value of single source, creating a single consumable source for information access. I think that's where the value lies, as I'll address more later in this conversation. So why is this needed? I consider this existential for any enterprise today, and I'm really I worry for a lot of organizations, particularly the larger ones, where they're nowhere close to even arriving at a single unified logical data model. They're living in a world of silos, and at one level, it's hard to see a pathway forward to even bring this together. And why is it important? In very simple terms, like I say, your silos are disconnected, stay disconnected. That is the lowest level of maturity. Many organizations are able to bring the silos together, but there's a massive delay in doing so. I would like to say that information delayed is information denied. And many others who've been brave enough and courageous enough to, connect all their silos, the cost of doing so traditionally has been extremely high. So I'm also aware of a lot of senior executives who have presented curated information. There's an army of analysts, data analysts, or business analysts who put this information together painfully, meticulously, and I'll leave it to you to imagine the meaning of the word curate here. It's not a very efficient process. And I consider this as if I'm being flown on a plane where, the pilots are blindfolded. I would not want my pilot to be blindfolded, or I would not want my surgeon to be blindfolded at all. I want them to have access to all the information that is necessary to do their job. But why does this not apply to an enterprise? Why are senior executives partially blind? They're very smart people, but why do they not have all the information as it happens? Now, the reasons are many, as we'll discuss further. But clearly, this has created what I call haves and have-nots. Haves are the enterprises who have managed to connect or are on their way to connect, unify all their data silos. And have-nots are the ones who are clueless right now. And this has huge implications for their future. So, the have-nots obviously are making poorer decisions because they don't have the right data. And I'm not saying that this is the only reason for poor decisions, but this is a fundamental prerequisite for making good decisions, to have the right data as it happens. And these companies gradually become uncompetitive. Now, it's not easily visible from the outside that the reason for their failure was lack of, proper data, proper information, lack of proper timely information. But, just recently somebody was telling me what Netflix did not bring down Blockbuster. Many of you remember, the Blockbuster video chains. One existed in almost every neighborhood of the country. What actually brought down Blockbuster was its own policies. Had they even looked at their consumer data, and I'm sure one part of Blockbuster, at least one part, knew that consumers they hated, it was a necessary evil. They hated paying all the late fees. I mean, I had to pay, more than the cost of a videotape as late fees on occasion. And another part of Blockbuster knew that about 16% of their revenue was coming from late fees. But perhaps people were not connecting the dots. The brand not being loved and too much money being made from late fees. There was a correlation there. And what happens to these enterprises? History is littered with organizations who don't exist today. So I call it a clear and present danger for enterprises to not keep this goal in existence and to not be working towards unifying all their data assets. Because if you don't unify, there's no talk of even discussing, deploying AI and all the smart, deep learning and machine learning based strategies that are being talked about all over today. Because if the very foundation of everything you do above is missing, then good luck. So why is it so difficult to create what I'm calling this unified data model across the enterprise? And the reasons are cultural and technical. Now, I cannot much help with all the cultural reasons, but I can only make the point that, I think I've made the point that this is really existential. And all across, up and down an enterprise, people have to realize that they don't do this, or if they delay doing this, there's a price to be paid. My favorite example is an airline where every time I upgrade to business because I have a high status, and then when I go to check-in, they offer me an opportunity to upgrade to Economy Plus. So I'm flying business, and they're offering me an opportunity to upgrade to Economy Plus for $39. So clearly, this airline doesn't know. One part of the airline doesn't know what's happening to its own customers. And what is it doing? It may seem harmless, but I was thinking, what has it done? What do I think of this airline? I grew up thinking of them as an amazing brand, and I don't consider them an amazing brand. They've become a commodity. I'm obviously not going to name the airline here. So what are some of the challenges or key challenges? I think, on the cultural side, lack of a strong central will to make this happen is the biggest factor. If the C-suite of an organization decides that this has to happen, they cannot fly partially blind. Or they cannot fly with an instrument panel which is delayed by minutes. And, they'll find a way to make this happen. So assuming the will has been created, what else comes in the way? Obviously, these are organizations which are already in flight, so a lot of investments have been made, and these investments in legacy technologies are in operation and running the business. There are, of course, insecurity across the employee base, and this has to be addressed. But also, I think this commercially and it's considered commercially unviable and technically extremely complex. People don't know where to begin. And then I've also run into organizations where they think even if they attempt this, consumption is also unviable. How are they going to consume if they put all their data assets together into, on some affordable modern platform, let's say Hadoop, or on Amazon S3? Easy consumption has not been established. How will all my Excel users, my Tableau users, really connect to these massive unified data assets and still be able to perform? Now, we at Impetus, we've seen a lot of companies go through this, or actually they're going through such unification initiatives. And it is not easy. I mean, this is literally, this requires a massive amount of courage. So let's look at some of the broad phases of going through this. How do you bring all your silos together, given you're already in flight? And then how do you consume? Now, I'm not presenting just one standard recipe, but I'm just presenting a loose framework for a recipe. And each organization will have to create its own based on their own realities and what kind of gratification cycles they can afford. So the first phase is data acquisition. Now, my data will exist in it already exists in all the transactional stores, and from the transactional stores, it's already making its way to various legacy data warehouses. And in addition, new sources have emerged of new sources, particularly of unstructured or semi-structured data, have come into being. Now, there are technologies available in HDFS or Amazon's S3, which provide to become landing zones for all my historical data and all the incremental data that is continuously being generated. So, unlike how things were done in the past, I can just bring all my data, my raw data, together in one place, be it S3 or be it on HDFS or any such distributed file system. And once I can bring in one place, one landing zone, then I can work on validating the integrity of this data and begin registering for lineage as well as my security classification. Now, next comes all the processing. As the title says, who will do what my ETL jobs did? Am I going to rewrite all the logic that exists in my hundreds and thousands of ETL workloads? This is a non-starter for most organizations. A few brave ones have gone ahead and recreated everything by hand. But this is sort of the Y2K moment, in my opinion. And unlike the Y2K moment, nobody's forcing this explicitly on any organization. So how do you go about this? Now, fortunately, various tools have emerged to automatically migrate all the needed logic from ETL workloads. And our company, Impetus, has also created a workload migration capability that can migrate logic from ab initio graphs or, PL SQL or various Teradata workloads or Netezza. And this can provide a massive head start and can take can really shrink the magnitude of this whole effort. And one has to be very smart about doing this. So one has to, do this in small iterations so that they can continuously keep testing their approach and continue to create gratification. Next comes the question of, where do I persist all this data? Now, I'm sure many of you are already aware, there's such a wide variety of choices available, and these have matured now, for on-premise or for persistence in the cloud. And I can really store these data assets for widespread consumption by my traditional BI, for my traditional BI use cases, my new emerging intelligent applications or AI applications, as well as all my downstream applications. And a lot of these platforms have really matured in terms of, providing all the governance and access control capabilities as well. They've become really fine-grained. And I think Ajay is going to talk about what his product provides in terms of access control mechanisms. Next is the phase of integration. And a key dimension of this is arriving at a single glossary that the entire organization, all the key stakeholders have aligned on. So no longer will the organization call the customer by 5 different names. And this is really important. I think this is one of the key event in this whole process, where there's alignment on a single glossary. And this allows for me to connect all my, or unify all the data assets for the business context, and I can populate all my repositories. Now there's so many different choices here. I can use various NoSQL databases. The myriads of choices emerging, and one can take an approach of not pinning down on one technology, but just keeping their choices flexible. So imagine if I've integrated everything. Next comes, I can set up all of my unified data for all the analytics and BI use cases. I can create some downstream formats. I can derive some of my data assets into a graph database. I can build some OLAP cubes. And as Ajay will talk about, now the capabilities are there to build humongous OLAP cubes that contain all the needed dimensions and attributes and measures to satisfy all kinds of use cases in enterprise. And lastly, now I can publish all of this data for use by various constituencies inside my enterprise. I can let my shadow IT not be in conflict anymore, but I can actually become, I can really support them and become a partner, establish protocols for this democratization. And as you'll see, one of the largest uses of such data is for self-service BI, and this becomes a massive reality. And all across this, now, the maturity has been reached, which allows for proper governance that is needed for any enterprise. For security reasons, for compliance and regulatory reasons, all of this is doable now. This is we don't have the time to go into more details, but all my metadata management and master data management can be done at this unified scale. There's a lot of promising products which are now available. We have used many such approaches. There's one customer for whom we have built the third version of their unified data lake, and it has nearly 6,000 data feeds coming in on a daily basis. And there are massive catalogs, API catalogs, and downstream graph databases that are available for all kinds of shadow IT organizations to use. Now, a lot of people that I run into at various large companies consider, the access and consumption as a massive challenge. So let's talk about this. There are a lot of new breakthrough solutions which have emerged for really taking care of access. Now, as I earlier said, the biggest use case that I've seen from traditional enterprise data warehouses of the BI use cases, and then the new emerging one is all the use cases being generated by the data scientists in the organization. And of course, there are these downstream applications that also consume this data. So let me hand over to Ajay Anand, who's going to describe how Kairos Insights is really helping with this access at this massive unified scale. Ajay, over to you.
Thanks, Praveen. So as Praveen was describing the different aspects of creating the unified logical data model, and one of the most critical components is how is this data actually going to be consumed? And that's a critical measure of success and really drives the ROI. How do you close that last mile gap with the people who are actually going to be using this data to make decisions? And if we look at the broad classes of usage, there's data scientists, there's machine learning applications that are really diving into the data, running models and algorithms to derive insights. But there's a large class of users across your enterprise, which are business users, who typically use business tools, Excel, Tableau, MicroStrategy, and so forth, who can get a lot of value from this data if it was made accessible and consumable for them. So we're going to talk about, how to do that. So the first part, as Praveen mentioned, is, the glossary, or having a consistent view of this data, having consistent definitions of the different data elements that are made available to your users, so that people are dealing with it in a way with a consistent data semantic model. That provides the kind of the guide rails for a business user to be successful, or even a data scientist to be successful, to know exactly what you're dealing with and have confidence in the integrity of that data. Beyond the semantic model is really now, how do I, as I fire a query on this data, how do I get the high-speed access to enable me to follow a train of thought and address the question? And this tends to be frustrating for business users as well. People create data lakes and say, okay, have at it. First of all, how do I weight this data lake? How do I make sense of it? And then when I fire a query on it, and it's chunking through, billions of rows of data, hundreds of dimensions, it's going to take time. So how do I get that fast access so that it becomes usable? Because a lot of people, construct data lakes and then get disillusioned that it's not really delivering value to my end user. And that's a critical component of driving ROI. The third big important aspect of this is you've created your unified data model. You want to expose it to all of your business users. How do you make sure that security is maintained? How do you make sure they're seeing only exactly what they're allowed to see and making decisions in a controlled way? So here, having a fine-grained security model that integrates all the different elements of the security stack, from authentication, strong authentication, access control, authorization, auditing, encryption, all of that, should be a consistent model that is followed across your enterprise. And finally, self-service, right? So one of the big inhibitors for a business user is if they have to describe their problem to somebody else, and that person now has to go off and write complex SQL queries and then come back to them with a report, and they go, hey, this wasn't exactly what I needed, and I want to modify something. That process is cumbersome and painful and time-consuming. So having the ability to utilize this data with no learning curve and use it in a self-service interactive way can really be transformational in terms of driving usage of the unified data model. So in a high-level architecture perspective, what we're looking at here is you've brought all of your data, you've consolidated all of your data into that single source of truth, the unified logical data model. And now you need to construct an enterprise consumption layer, which provides the semantics as well as the fast access for all of your consumers, right? So these could be your data scientists, but for a large part, your business users who are using applications like, Excel, Tableau, whatever BI tool they're most comfortable with. For them to be able to now utilize this data, slice and dice, explore it, interactively look at different aspects of it. And when they find something that they want to explore further, have the ability to drill down into the, deepest level of granularity to see exactly what's going on. And being able to do this in an interactive and interactive way with instant response time is what people are looking for. So they want to empower business users give them the ability to, dive into this data lake, get insights from it, but also give them the guidance on how to navigate the system, because it can be the Wild West, right? You've brought in all of these different data sources. There's thousands of different, fields available for analysis. How do you give some guidance to your business user on how to navigate, and then give them the fast access to be able to really be successful? So I think the important point is that this is now possible, right? So there are tools available now to, really be able to interact with this data in a self-service way with no waiting. So you can fire off a query on this data and get the response right away. You don't have to be a SQL expert or a programmer. In fact, a lot of organizations that we talk to are trying to discourage this aspect of being SQL jockeys, because when you're dealing with a huge amount of data, you don't want to have people running unconstrained SQL queries on this data, because each of these SQL queries can take time to run if you're trying to do, a full table scan or a join of massive tables, or trying to do group bys across massive data sets, or trying to do a distinct count. We've got a customer with over 1 billion distinct member IDs, and they're looking to do a distinct count across, different aspects, geographies, usage, and so forth. But imagine if you're trying to do a distinct count query on a database, Hive or any other database, and you've got 200 billion rows. Trying to do a distinct count on that, you could be sitting for hours trying to figure out, what the results are. So how do you, solve that problem? So the idea is to, give them a more structured way to be able to deal with this data, work on the results. So the reason people like dealing with Excel or Tableau is that they can see what, whatever they're visualizing, how they're putting things together, how they're, the trends that they're visualizing, and then diving down into it, versus having to write unconstrained SQL queries. So it kind of changes the way people are interacting with it. Of course, there's no compromise on security. So whatever tools you have and whatever middleware you're putting in place, the security framework or the security policies you have defined need to be consistently followed through that. And finally, being able to scale to thousands of users across the enterprise, right? So once again, one of the important things is you're dealing with a huge amount of data, right? And if all of these users are writing queries to it, and each of these queries is a massive operation, how much can your infrastructure withstand? So there, comes in the concept of how much of the processing can you do beforehand, doing the pre-processing, doing the aggregations, doing the cube building necessary to be able to, have the data ready. So now when a query comes in, you're not trying to do that processing at query time. So the results, for the most part, have already been computed across all the different aspects if you're building a cube. So now you can deal with many more queries. Thousands of queries can come in, because now these are lightweight queries that are just retrieving information and sending it back to your visualization tools. So that really transforms the way, hundreds or thousands of users can now access your unified data model and be able to get value from it. So we take a look at an example of one of the leading telco companies. And they were looking to do, they actually constructed a data lake. They're looking to do all kinds of analysis from it, analyzing viewer information, analyzing information about, which channels are being watched, at what frequency, how much time are people spending on each channel, or as they're flipping to the next one. This information is available, is needed for, providing value to their advertisers. It's also needed for how to best service their customers. It has impact on customer satisfaction in terms of how they provide these capabilities. So it has a lot of impact to the bottom line of this of the customer to be able to get the deep insights from viewer analytics, take a look at customer interaction across various touch points, take a look at customer service interaction, and bring all of this together to really deliver the results for the business user. And the way they do this is, they've constructed a data lake. They have the semantic models in place, and they use Kairos here to be able to construct multidimensional cubes. And what these cubes do is that they pre-aggregate data from across hundreds of attributes across billions of rows, and then be able to consolidate that information, but maintain the level of granularity that they need to really drill down into the lowest level of detail. So even though you're providing aggregated information, you're not taking away the granular information either. So because these cubes can grow to tremendous size, and we can take advantage of the new generation of commodity hardware, Hadoop systems and S3 systems, cloud systems that are available to really be able to scale out for storing this data as well as storing these cubes, and then being able to access it in a transparent, self-service, interactive way from their BI tools.
Ajay, I should add that Impetus played a key role in making sure that all the data came together here. Using its automatic workload migration tool, we were able to migrate massive amount of logic and, of course, data from various Teradata-based enterprise data warehouses into this single unified data lake.
Right. So they were able to, take care of all the different elements that that Praveen has talked about in terms of creating that unified data lake, and then also address the access and consumption issue. So they were able to solve problems with this infrastructure that they had, tried in the past through various means. They'd even tried a 40-node Teradata deployment and were not able to, really address the kind of analysis that they were looking for. So this is just one example. Other examples include a digital experience company that is, has also done the same thing. They've collected data from all the different data silos, brought it together into a data lake, and this has been transformational for them. Their CEO can now look at an executive dashboard, and he does this on a weekly basis. Take a look at, for example, customer interactions across various components of his company, product usage, marketing campaigns, customer support, and be able to get a view of his whole company in one dashboard, and then be able to drill down as he looks at things that might be of concern or of interest, to be able to drill down and look and get answers right away. So this executive dashboard is, giving him a visual view into huge amounts of data and giving him that instant access in a simple, self-service interactive way to be able to get answers to the questions across his organization. A third example is an investment bank that was looking to do a risk analysis and CCAR analysis. And here again, they had multiple silos of information with different asset classes. And if they needed to do a query, each data warehouse gave them a siloed view of that information. And they were never able to assess the risk in a holistic way across their enterprise in the timely manner that they needed. So by bringing all this together into a consolidated data lake, now they were able to assess risk across all of these different asset classes and do this in a self-service interactive way. So you can get an assessment of the risk and make much faster decisions in terms of approving loans or approving investment decisions. So it really changes the way that they can make those decisions that affect their company, affect the top line of their company, and do it in a way that is fully informed in terms of the risk as it affects the whole organization. So, making better decisions, making more informed decisions, and making those decisions quickly is transformational. So I guess the point we're making is that this whole process can be a game changer for enterprises. By getting those cross-organizational connected insights, that can fundamentally change the decision-making of an enterprise at all levels. The executive team, as well as the business user that is looking to look at a different aspect of his marketing campaign and wants to make a decision about different geographies or where to send a particular ad. All of those decisions can be made in a much more informed way in terms of targeting which customer demographics. You can really take a look at all of your data and make much more informed decisions and make them quickly. So it's important to get that instant response time. So as I mentioned, having an executive dashboard that gives you a holistic view. But for an executive, if he's going to wait for minutes for an answer to a query, that is not, quickly loses patience. So for this particular customer, the dashboard had to be made available within 5 seconds. That was the criteria, and this spanned across, as I said, hundreds of attributes and dimensions and billions of rows, and some of those rows was massive cardinality. And then there are the practitioners that are looking for deep analytics. They want to drill down into the data, do interactive ad hoc analysis at the lowest level of detail. So your infrastructure is going to be able to support that as well. So this is really enabling BI at a size and granularity that was really inconceivable before. As we talked to this digital experience company, they said, we never even thought about trying to do distinct count on a dimension with a billion cardinality. It was just not possible, and we didn't even think of doing it, because we knew it was not going to be possible. But now that we know we can, it's really opening up a lot more aspects of the analysis we can do. So really, the bottom line is, constructing this unified data model, building the single source of truth, and providing the access and consumption, and it can really drive the adoption and democratization of data across the enterprise and really transform the way an organization does its business. Now I'm going to hand it back to Larry for looking at any questions or wrapping things up.
Great. We have a number of excellent questions that have come in. I would encourage you to continue to do that while we're beginning to answer these. The first is a common question that comes up quite often, and the question says, should we go with a big bang approach or a phased approach to get the data into the unified model? And Praveen, if you would take that one on.
Yeah, my recommendation is, go with the phased approach. And this is for two reasons. One, cultural, and another one is more in the technology domain. Culturally, it always makes sense in any large enterprise to provide early gratification. So if you take a phased approach and are smart in choosing what data assets you're going to move, I would rather move data assets which are not which are not being easily used and there's a critical need for. I would move them first so that the newer platforms that Ajay spoke of can really provide the capabilities that the users are looking for. And technically also, I think, you want to keep refining your approach. So doing iteratively in small phases allows you to refine your approach because mistakes will be made in the process. And you can keep plugging these holes, keep learning. A big bang approach is more likely to fail because things can get out of hand, organization priorities can change, investment can be pulled back, leading to failure. Back to you, Larry.
Excellent. Thank you, Praveen. And of course, we have automated tools which will allow you to do automated data-driven assessments and really kind of create those roadmaps and those blueprints and help you understand where you should get started in order to implement that phased approach. The second question that comes to us says, You've mentioned that you have an automated workload migration tool. What do we do with any code that the tool doesn't automate, or do you feel your tool can migrate 100% of the code using your automation? And Praveen, if you again would step up to that.
No, I think this is an excellent question. So on an average, across various kinds of sources of logic, we are seeing anywhere ranging from 70 to 90+% automatic migration. So it's a much smaller set of workloads which are not being migrated automatically. And what is happening is this intelligent engine which does automatic migration is also learning continuously from the patterns that it cannot migrate. And we're constantly adding to its capabilities. So the percentages are increasing. And ultimately, what is left behind has to be taken care of manually. So there is no escape from that. But there's such a massive head start. Imagine if I can do 85% automatic migration, and the tool provides for verification as well. So I don't just migrate my logic. There are capabilities, inbuilt capabilities to do automatic verification. And once I've done that, if I only have to address the remaining 15%, it's a much less daunting task.
Excellent. Thank you, Praveen. The next question says, you have made several references to delivering instant response times at massive scale. How do you accomplish that? And Ajay Anand, if you would address this.
Sure. So what we've done at Kairos Insights is we've developed technology, this patented technology for being able to build multidimensional cubes at massive scale. Now, the OLAP cubes have been around for a while, right? So, they've been around for decades, and that's been the preferred way for business users to interact with systems, slice and dice, and get interactive response. And it's the challenge was, as the data grew beyond a certain point, it grew beyond those capabilities of the traditional OLAP tools to be able to deal with it. We've solved that problem by being able to do multidimensional OLAP cubes and build multidimensional OLAP cubes in a distributed, clustered environment and store them in a distributed way across this clustered system. So we solved the scalability problem. And by doing that, once you've built these multidimensional cubes, what you've really done is you've pre-aggregated and computed all types of combinations of the results and aggregations across all of your different data elements. You've created the indexes, you've created the partitions, you've created the aggregations. So you've done all the heavy lifting up front. Once these cubes have been built, now when a query comes in, it's a very simple matter for us to be able to get the response from the data that's already been created in these cubes to be able to serve it back instantly. So typically a query, we can respond to a query in sub-second response times, even when you're dealing with large data sets. And, we talked about creating these dashboards, which have, hundreds of queries. Being able to render that whole dashboard within 5 seconds is something that we deliver for our customers. So this has really, been a massive pain point for users, and a lot of people have tried solving this in various ways. And of course, there are multiple approaches to this, but this describes what we do. And basically, there is no way to give you that interactive performance without doing a lot of work beforehand, right? And that's kind of the basic capability that we provide. We do the heavy lifting up front, so at query time, you don't have to wait.
Great. Thank you, Ajay. The next question says, is again a very interesting one. It says that in today's world, there are other big data platforms than just on-premise Hadoop. Made some references here to cloud-based platforms, S3, Apache Spark, and so forth. The question is, what do you see the challenges in moving from one data platform to another big data platform? Do you have any technique to streamline that process? And Praveen, if you would step in and answer that.
I think this is an excellent question because we have several customers who have gone for an on-premise approach today, but with clearly a sight on ultimately moving to the cloud, and they have kept the viability of moving to the cloud in existence all along. What I mean by this is they've made sure that all decisions are being taken such that the migration to cloud is as seamless, including making sure that the migration to the cloud is always working. So it's just a matter of time when all the data assets come together on premise. They can just flip the switch at some point. So for example, our workload migration tool that I spoke of has also been used by some of our customers to migrate from one such modern platform to another. So imagine it's a very generic engine which can be configured for any source and target. So it reads the workload, creates a semantic model internally, and then generates for any chosen target. In fact, one large government organization came to us, and they had these systems which were written generations ago, and they had no documentation left. The people who wrote all the logic were long gone. And we were able to generate all the documentation from our internal semantic model. So our automatic migration tool read all the workloads, created an internal semantic model, and we created a capability to generate user documentation.
Could I add one thing to that from a consumption perspective as well? By creating this BI consumption layer on top of it, you're also shielded from what the different platforms are. So we have a customer that actually moved from an on-premise system to a cloud-based system. And for their business users, it was completely transparent because they continue to do things the way they always did. And that BI consumption layer was now, as they moved the data to the cloud, they also implemented the BI consumption layer there. So for a business user interacting with it, it looked exactly the same. So it was a very seamless process.
Great example, Ajay. The next one, and this will be the last question we have time for today. Please do continue to send questions in, however, and we'll make sure that any questions that do not get answered live on the air will be answered in a written email form back to you. So don't let me cut off any interest you have in continuing to submit questions, but it is about, we're 55 minutes into the webinar, and we want to honor your time. The next question that came in says, can you incrementally add data to the enterprise consumption layer? And again, Ajay Anand, if you would address that.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a very important question. And that's what people have to deal with because data is coming in on a daily, hourly, on a very regular basis. New data is coming in, and this data needs to be incrementally added on quickly into whatever aggregations you've created with the multidimensional cubes. And we provide that capability to transparently, incrementally add on that data and also take care of any data changes, right? So if you've got data coming in this week which changes data from a previous week or a previous month, you can very simply replace that partition and make those changes so that you have a consistent view of the latest information that's been brought in. So all of that is automated, so you don't have to put in any manual processes to be able to do these incremental updates. And the incremental updates can happen quickly because the new data coming in is typically much smaller than the historical data that you've got stored. So you can quickly add on that incremental data to your multidimensional cubes.
Excellent. Thank you, Ajay. That wraps our webinar today in the questions that came in. Any others that have not been answered, as I say, we'll get answers back to you. If you have colleagues that were unable to attend today, we had almost 200 people here online, and it looks like people really did kind of hang in through the Q&A portion. So I trust that the information today has been very valuable to you. but this complete webinar will be archived, and you will send a link out so you can share that with any colleagues that may have missed today's session. In addition, if you would take a minute here at the close and give us and rate your user experience today and give us any feedback you may have as to how we can improve these in the future. And if you want to contact us, that can be done by sending your inquiries to the address that you see here on the screen. Either if you specifically want contact with Kairos, you have the ability to indicate that here. Otherwise, you can use info@impetus.com, and we'll see that this gets to the correct individual on our side. A little reminder on the screen in front of you right now, we will be exhibiting at both Spark plus AI Summit, June 4th through 6th in San Francisco. It's coming up here in just about 3 or 4 weeks. And we will also be in San Jose for the DataWorks Summit, where we are a Diamond Level sponsor, and that's June 17th through 21st. Would encourage you, if you are attending, to be sure to stop by and see us. We'd love to meet you face to face. Lastly, once again, if you take a few minutes and provide us with a rating for today's experience and feedback, this concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much for attending, and look forward to interacting with you again in the future.